I was running away from that old guy.
Yeah.
I was running away from that carpenter that I didn't want to be. And not that there was anything wrong with it. It just wasn't who I wanted to be. And it wasn't my dream. That was my dad's dream. So I was running away from an ordinary life, a normal life, a typical life, the common life. And I was running to something extraordinary. I didn't really know what that was yet, but I was running to something newer, bigger, in my view, better. And then that led to many other things.
This is BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgenson.
Welcome out to BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio. I'm your host, Tyler Jorgenson, and we have Croix Sather today coming on, talking to us about how to become unstoppable. He is the creator of unstoppablemorning.com. He has some amazing accomplishments in endurance and perseverance and overcoming challenges. And we're really excited to learn more about everything that Croix has going on. So welcome out to the show.
Hey, Tyler, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before we hit record about that we've had some previous people on the show that are really into endurance and marathons and running. And there's such an interesting parallel between those types of things and entrepreneurship. But so when was that moment in your life where you first realized that you were an entrepreneur?
Well, that goes way back when I was just a kid, I guess, 12 years old, 13 years old, maybe. I remember when my dad, who was a carpenter at the time, was working for another guy, and he had been working for him forever, I guess. And he had finally decided to go out on his own business. And so after a couple of years in his own business, I remember him saying many times to me, is my worst year in business was better than my best year working for the other guy. And so as 12, 13, 14 years old, that was pretty impressionable. So I've never really had a normal job. A couple of stints of insanity where I went and worked for someone else. But generally speaking, I've never worked for anybody else.
Yeah. And that's not uncommon. A lot of entrepreneurs have done those job that was really more of a contract type of a thing, and totally understand that. What was your first thing? What was the first dabble into entrepreneurship and business ownership?
My dad was a carpenter. My brother was a carpenter. My grandfather was a painter. So I became a carpenter, kind of fell it in the family tradition. But I realized after a bunch of years doing it, I was like, I love it. It's making me a lot of money, but not really what I want to do. And so I started looking for other things, but I had no idea, because the only thing I knew was working with my hands. The only thing I knew. We had nobody in our family or our circle of influence that was anything other than somebody who worked with their hands: plumbers, electricians, HVAC guys, driveway guys, whatever. And so I had no other experience outside of that, but I had gone to a conference to learn how to flip real estate. And I didn't even know these things existed before this, but somehow I got on somebody's mailing list. And that was back when it was actually mail. It wasn't email. It was real mail. And I went to this event, and it was speaker after speaker after speaker. And one guy's talking about stock market, one guy's talking about real estate. And then Tony Robbins comes on, and he's talking about motivation and mindset and the power within and all these other things. I'm like, that's it. I want to do what he's doing, and I want to teach like he's teaching. And that totally changed the trajectory of my life.
So I love that you come from the trades. I think the ability to create something, have a vision and make it a reality is such a transferable skill from the trades into other things, right? And so you got inspired through Tony Robbins and through seeing other people do it. What was your first step into capturing that new vision, Croix 2.0?
I had to learn how to speak from the stage, for one.
Yeah.
And I had absolutely no idea. And I had absolutely zero skill to be able to do it. But I started doing research and figured out, well, how do you do it? And then I heard about Toastmaster clubs. And then I eventually hired coaching and hired other coaches and went to other sorts of training that were like that. So I did that. And then I was always a fairly good storyteller to some level, but it was never polished. So I was a trade guy. So I didn't, I spoke like trade guys speak. And, it's kind of rough language when you're on the job site. And so I had to learn how to get a slightly more refined from where I came from. You had to stop the cursing and stop the stories that you can't tell in public and things like that.
Get a little bit more polished. And so talk to me about a little bit of the process of making that switch. You started learning, you started training, but what was your first offer into the market that was no longer the, craftsman, but now the new educator and influencer, Croix?
Well, it's interesting because I wanted to become a speaker, and as you can imagine, or you probably know, that's a very competitive field. you have speakers that are professional speakers that are on TV, on the news, politicians. Then you have the football stars, the astronauts, the guy who has $1 billion business and all these other things. So how do you stand out against that? And so I was trying to compete against that, but I didn't have a platform being a place that I could speak from that had some sort of authority. And so going through the Tony Robbins and the other personal development type stuff, and I really went deep into it, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books and audios and coaching and training. I spent years and tons of hours doing it. And I kept hearing the same message. What would you do if you knew you would succeed? So failure was impossible. What would you do? So I kept asking myself that question for a long time, and I didn't have a really great answer. I did a lot of little stuff, but never had a great answer. Then I had heard about a guy who ran across America. And I'm like, that's the coolest freaking thing I have ever heard in my entire life. But I wasn't a runner. And so now I had to learn how to become a runner, and not just to run one marathon, but to run a marathon a day for 100 days, to run a total of 3,000 miles across the country. And so I hired the guy who had inspired me, the video that I saw of the guy who inspired me. I went and I hired him, and he trained me how to run a marathon a day as compared to running one as like a bucket list thing, to go run one marathon. And so with just 1 year of training, I'm in California and I'm starting my journey of running a marathon a day for 100 days. But I wanted to make it more than just about me. So I also added in the idea of, well, what if I spoke every day? So what if I had some sort of a keynote inspirational speech every day? And so to find paid speaking gigs would be almost impossible, especially one every 26 miles. So I ended up speaking to groups that were in challenge, groups that were in a difficult moment. So United Way, homeless shelters, addiction centers, wounded warriors, Hope for the Warriors, halfway houses, prisons even. And so every day I was starting the morning by speaking to somebody for about an hour, hour and a half, and then I'd go run in the afternoon. And I did that for 100 days without a day off. And so now that at the end of it, not only gave me a really cool thing to talk about in my personal life, but also gave me a platform to speak from, which led to very big speaking gigs. The first one, I went from 0 to 2,500. Then I went from 2,500 to, I don't know, it was like $9,000 or something like that. Then I went from 9 to 15 and then to 20. So I jumped up really quick over the course of literally just 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that, and I'm amazed by all of it. The first question I have when I hear that you spend 100 days running across the countries doing a marathon every day, there's a lot of logistical challenges that go into that. Just making sure you have a place to sleep, like you said, finding a place to speak. You had to have a whole team probably supporting you, but also just the ability to not work for 100 days. And to be able to run and do that. Like, did you focus on a certain amount of savings, or did you get some sponsors? How did you overcome just the ability? Like, how did you create the margin in your life to be able to even go after that task?
Well, luckily they say naive is bliss, and luckily that's true. I had no idea how much it would cost, and I really didn't have anything figured out. I just grabbed the bull by the horns. I'm like, it grabbed me. When the dream whispers to you, you got to listen to it, because if you've been given that dream, I believe that you also have the ability to accomplish it. And I didn't know how I was going to either do the running, the speaking, or the money aspect of it, but I dipped into savings and I used home equity line and things like that. And it ended up costing close to $200,000 for one guy to run across the country. So that's me. It's a crew. It's an RV. It's gas. It's food. It's the people that are offsite that are arranging the speaking engagements and doing the social media. And that was back when social media was kind of a newish thing still.
Yeah.
It was back in 2011. So Facebook was there. Instagram wasn't even there yet. And so it was that was still sort of the frontier as well. The frontier is trying to figure out social media. And I did not do that well. But what I did do right is I got on the news. So I was on the CBS, NBC, Fox, all of them, all the time. So I got to do that. And now that's really nice for a demo reel. It got me onto a lot of stages, but it didn't put any money in my pocket.
Right. And that fascinating. Thank you for sharing that it was a big investment, right? I think it is easy when we tell the stories of the past to skip over the harder part, or like the uglier parts. Like, we tell the rough story and the challenges, but sometimes we forget, like, hey, I invested a lot of time and money into it as well, right? Not just it was hard mentally and physically to run. So I appreciate you sharing that you invested in that, but I love the payout, right? At the other side of this, you had your story, you created your platform, you were able to raise your prices and step into, it was really, you didn't really run across the country. You ran from old Croix to new Croix, right? And you became in that process, that new version that you were seeking to create.
A lot of people
really
ask
cool.
me, what were you running away from? And if I was running away from anything, which I don't look at it that way, but if I was running away from anything, because I got that comment a lot, I was running away from that old guy.
Yeah.
I was running away from that carpenter that I didn't want to be. And not that there was anything wrong with it. It just wasn't who I wanted to be. And it wasn't my dream. That was my dad's dream. And he did great. And he was a master craftsman. He was just absolutely amazing. But it wasn't my dream. So I was running away from an ordinary life, a normal life, a typical life, the common life. And I was running to something extraordinary. I didn't really know what that was yet, but I was running to something newer, bigger, in my view, better. And then that led to many other things, got me onto a lot of stages, a couple of TED Talks, made a whole bunch of money doing that for a while. And then eventually it led me to being nomadic for 7 years. And now I'm rebuilding or reinventing myself again. And I'm in the process of that because there were some things I didn't like about that business. Like I didn't like living out of hotels. I didn't like going to Las Vegas to Orlando to Las Vegas to Orlando and go back and forth. Because after you've been there 4 or 5 times, it's kind of boring. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, I need to do something else. And then, so that leads me to somewhere else. And I imagine in 10 years, there'll be another reinvention.
Yeah, they say, every 7 years, we really are a totally different person, or at least we should be if we're growing.
Biologically,
right?
We are.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but so many people struggle with the concept of letting go of the past in order to embrace the future. And so sometimes it takes a traumatic event or just a significant event, a catalyst. And I can't think of a smaller catalyst than 100 consecutive marathons. That definitely puts an exclamation point on I am changing. And I think that's really, really cool. So talk to us about the new version of Croix. So you started changing, you didn't love that lifestyle. My first question is, what does lifestyle design mean to you?
It's living a life that you're excited to live. And that's different for everybody because there are people who are introverts, extroverts, and I'm kind of an ambivert or whatever they call it, where, I go in and out. So sure. Sometimes I'll go disappear for months because I want to be by myself. And then there'll be months that I don't want to be by myself ever. And I've learned to embrace that weird dichotomy of a personality that I have sometimes. And I wouldn't call it bipolar. If it's bipolar, it's like monthly bipolar, like 1 month here, 1 month
Sure.
there. And so I've learned to embrace that instead of hide from it or shrink from it or be embarrassed by it. I've learned just to embrace that. And so when I go out for a run on a daily basis, I don't bring a watch or a phone or music or audiobooks or anything. It's just me and the road. That's an hour a day that I get to be completely by myself with just me and my thoughts, or sometimes my dogs. And so that's it. And that's, it's a brilliant thing. And I love that. Because we have so much noise in our life between the technology and the people and everything that's going on. We have so much noise. So to be able to pull back from that is really powerful. And it's very hard to do these days. I've cut out news out of my life completely because it was so toxic. Social media, I've controlled that in a way that I don't have the toxicity in the social media coming through anymore. So it's hitting the not interested. Yep. So I don't get politics. I don't get drama. I don't get people fighting in the streets. None of that crazy stuff. Yeah. I blocked it all because the mind is the most important thing you can protect. And it's your tool for everything.
Yeah. And it's interesting to become selectively ignorant, right? Meaning saying, I'm going to choose what data feeds I allow into this brain of mine. Because like you said, the mind is really powerful, but it is a noisy world. Did you live nomadically, you said, for 7 years? I think some of the countries included Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Costa Rica, Mexico, Colombia. You really saw a lot of the world. As you traveled, what perspective changes did you experience?
A couple of things. One is how similar we are rather than different. Because we all want the same sort of thing, no matter what country I was in, no matter if I spoke the language or not. And now I do speak English and Spanish. And what I saw is that everybody, they want to be happy. They want to be loved. They want to have food and safety. and they want to enjoy life. And that's universal for everyone. And when you go to countries where safety isn't, there is very little safety, or there's very little food, or there's some other difficult problem that we don't have in the US or in most Western culture, it gives you a different perspective. And I've been to like Colombia and Mexico. I've been to the barrios where you don't see white people, because you don't even see locals. They don't even want to be there because it's so crazy dangerous. But yet I'll go there and, do the social work where you get food or toys or clothing or something like that. And you get to see how difficult some circumstances and environments are for people. And that gives you a completely different level of gratitude and understanding what this world is like. And it's humbling, for one. And it's absolutely amazing, because you realize the human connection. And before I spoke Spanish, it didn't matter. I'd be down there. They loved me because I was there when nobody else was. And it was fantastic. And it turns out the Colombians are as a culture, some of the friendliest, nicest people on the entire planet. Amazing, amazing people. Different than other Latinos, different than Asians, different than other countries I've been to. The Colombians, and the reason for that is because what they went through with the narcos and the drugs and all that in the 80s and the 90s, and how dangerous that was. And now there was no parks. Kids couldn't go out in the street, none of that stuff. You walk into the street, you could get shot down by some gang violence, literally anywhere in the city. But now there's parks and you can walk safely. And it's one of the it's probably the best city in all of Latin America now. But just 20 years ago, it was a war zone. And so they have so much gratitude. And I think that's what makes them so special as a culture.
Gratitude truly is a leading indicator, I think, of contentment and happiness and joy. You mentioned that you're one of your mentors was Tony Robbins, and one of my favorite teachings from him echoes what you just said, that everywhere people around the world have similar needs, right? And he often said that people have two primary human needs. One is the need for certainty, and two is the need for variety. And I like that those are in such opposition to each other many times, but your life echoes this. Sometimes there's times where you want calm, and sometimes there's time you want adventure. How do you scratch that itch for variety in your life now?
Usually travel.
Yeah.
And I like variety a lot more than I like security. Mm-hmm. You need both. We all need some level of both, but I tend to lean much more strongly into the variety. And it's why I've started businesses from when I was a teen, from the moment I was old enough. I wasn't even old enough. I was like 12 years old, and I'm out shoveling walkways for people just so I can make a quarter, literally. Yeah. And so that's always been a part of my life, but I still need the security. And every time I leave the US and I come back, the one thing that shocks me every time, other than the pricing, is the level of organization and security that we have here. Even in this moment right now, where the US is kind of a little bit nuts to some level, it's nothing compared to most of the world. Right. We have it made here in that sense. And so it's a totally different vibe, different feeling. And I love Colombia. I absolutely love living in Colombia. That's where I spend most of my time now. But I also love the US. And so I go back and forth because I need both. I need that edge of chaos that Colombia still has. And then I got to come back to like the Zen place of the US. Like this is Zen here in many aspects.
Yeah, most entrepreneurs they have a much higher tolerance towards uncertainty, right? And so that makes a lot of sense. As you are now working on a new project, Unstoppable Morning, tell us a little bit about what that is and what you're hoping it accomplishes, and how it will serve the people that interact with it.
The Unstoppable, it's the idea that you have so much more power and ability to do what you want to do and you can do. So if you go back in my life, a year before I ran across America, I wasn't a runner. I was a little more than a couch potato. I mean, I wasn't fat or, I was a little chunky, but I wasn't like super overweight or anything, but I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't a runner or anything. And I made that massive change in a year. Going from a carpenter to an author and a speaker, it took a handful of years, but it was a massive change. And so Unstoppable is the idea that you can go from where you are to following those dreams and create an amazing life. But the Unstoppable Morning is really more about a routine that's going to set you up for success. And so that's a specific program that you go through, and it only takes, including the exercise, 45 minutes. So it's 20 minutes of exercise, and then there's 15 minutes of mindset, then there's 15 minutes of planning. And you do that every morning. And what that's going to do is it's going to align your mindset, align your emotions and your mind to the things that you want. Because you got to be there in your mind before you could realize it in your life. And so that's what that is. It's retraining your mind and your emotions, which are just as important, to become the person you want to become. Because there's a massive resistance. You know, if you want to become a millionaire and you've only made 50 grand your whole life, there's a huge resistance to get there. That's a 20x difference. And so you have to become that person in your mind to be able to start reducing that gap and then to eventually get to that. And that's programming your mind every day. And then there's the fitness aspect of it, because you can't be fully healthy and strong and have an incredible life unless you also have the physical aspect of it. And you don't have to run a marathon a day or anything. You just have to be relatively healthy and relatively strong. Still, I'm 54 now, excuse me. And I'm as strong as I was when I was in my 20s. I'm still bench pressing and lifting everything I did back then, because I make that a priority in my life. Not because I'm anything special, not because I'm genetically gifted. I'm certainly not genetically gifted as a runner, but I've chosen these things and I've maintained them.
There's the idea of the morning routine, and Miracle Morning was a program that was out there for a while. Your version and your concept of unstoppable morning and setting up a routine that sets up not just your day, but your life for success is something that's really powerful, and it's been out here. And I think it really helps a lot of people, especially if they can start their day structured. They're more likely to have a structured and successful day. As you've been building this business, your past business, and throughout these last things that you've created, what's been one of the biggest challenges that you've encountered, and how did you overcome it?
It's my biggest challenge is probably most people's biggest challenge, and it continues every day. And it's my own mindset. For me as an entrepreneur and a creative type, it's the distraction, and it's the wanting to do 50 different things. Where I've met people where they don't have that problem, but their problem is just the opposite, where they don't have any ideas or very few ideas. And so I hear that question is like, how do I find my passion? And my problem is more like, how do I narrow it down to one thing and stick with it long enough to actually have the kind of success that I want? But that's part of the morning routine, where that morning routine came from, is how do I dial in and keep focused so I can to get that? And that's how I overcome it. And I have to overcome that every day. You know, rent is due every day or every month, and you have to pay that rent. Otherwise, you're going to end up on the street. And it's the same thing with your mind. And it's the same thing with your emotions, same thing with your body. If you're not paying your dues every day, you're going to be in some place that you don't want to be, and you're not going to have the life that you want to have. So you got to pay those dues every single day.
Another former guest of the show was Tim Ferriss. And one of the things that I love that he shared about somebody said, we want to shadow you for a day. And he's like, my day is really boring, because most of my day is me kind of reflecting and thinking, because he spends so much energy thinking about what's the one big domino he can push over that will knock out all the other dominoes that are still laying out there that need to be knocked over. And I love the mindset, the shift of how do I just complete as many tasks as possible to what's the most important task I could accomplish, or the most significant task I could accomplish. What's your view on that? And as it relates to Unstoppable Morning, like, do you focus on, big picture, or do you think, do you approach it through small, consistent steps? What's your take?
It's a little bit of both, and it depends on the goal. It depends on the moment, depends on the season. It depends on a lot of things. And what I'm learning now, which I don't really like this, but I'm kind of forced into learning this, or relearning this, I guess. Yeah. When I started my YouTube channel recently, I've had a YouTube channel for years, but I haven't really done anything with it. And so I started making videos earlier this year, and I hit massive success right away. And videos started popping. I started getting a ton of views. And then I don't know what happened. If it was the algorithm, I pissed YouTube off. I don't know what happened, but I got 0 views. And then I wanted to give it all up. But I realized that journaling every day and realizing, like, why is this happening? Because then there's all these questions of imposter syndrome, self-worth, is the universe against me? All of these things. And what I realized is sometimes you just have to go through the motions, and knowing that at some point you'll get the result. And if, like Tim Ferriss, if you can find that big domino that's going to topple it over, then that's fantastic. That's even better. But sometimes it's just a matter of putting in the reps to eventually to get the result you want. It's like a bodybuilder. You don't go from 180 pounds and chunky to 180 pounds and super lean and ripped overnight. It takes years. And to become a ripped bodybuilder, it literally takes years. To become a millionaire, often it takes years. I mean, yeah, you hear the stories of people, it happens in a month or 2 or 3, but that's very uncommon. Mm-hmm. And the more likely scenario is that you've got to put the reps in day after day after day. And it's an unfortunate part of success. And it's why so few people succeed, because most people aren't willing to push through that resistance and push through that boredom and push through the struggles and the challenge and the roadblocks and everything else that comes in your way to be able to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, there was a recent study that included like the really fast rise of success of people such as like Chappell Rowan is a current artist that ever seems to have appeared out of nowhere overnight and become a huge name and celebrity. And it's consistently found it isn't overnight. It was that daily consistency that, like, it's the whole idea that a drop of water on a stone, you can blast a stone once with a hose full of water and it won't do anything. But if you just drop a single drop every day, over time, it will create a hole. And I think that consistency is, no matter where your style is, if you're going for one big domino or for, chipping away at many small things, either way, you can't do it by only doing it once a year, right? You got to chip away at it every day. You got to knock at it every day. I love that you are aware of lifestyle design. That's an important part of your life. I also think that business is not just about business, but it's about funding the life you want to create. So on a personal level, what's one item on your personal bucket list you're going to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Wow, that's a good question. I want to start traveling extensively again. In more than just going back and forth to Colombia, which are my 2 homes. Yeah. But I want to see more of the world. And now that I speak Spanish nearly fluently, I want to go to Spain, and I want to go through a lot of Latin parts of South America and other parts of Central America and Mexico. But I also want to get back to Asia because there's so many amazing places there I haven't been. Yeah. So those are a big part of it. And I'm still toying with the idea of maybe just doing another big epic run. It may be a run across America. I was planning on running up South America, which is more than double the length of run across America.
Oh, yeah.
The logistics and the sponsorships and all that, it's going to take far too much time and just far too many difficulties and so many places that I wouldn't have any connectivity, especially down in the southern half of Latin America. It's just there's no connectivity. Well, I guess we have satellites now, but
still. So I'm going to make you put a dot on that, right? So what's like one place you're going to say, Tyler, I'm going to go here?
There's so many places through South America that I want to see. I want to get to Cusco and Machu Picchu, and I want to go down to Tierra de Fuego, which is on the bottom of the continent, and everything in between. And at some point, eventually, one of my personal life goals, maybe it's not going to be this year, but it might start this coming year, is I want to get some sort of a vehicle, van, whatever it is, and then travel for a couple of years, just seeing different places in all of North America, all of North and South America, and then go through the Americas for a couple of years and just stop and see wherever the wind takes me.
I love it. I think that's what's so cool about creating businesses that are, work with that beyond your time and your, just trading dollars for time. It is the freedom that it gives you to be able to travel and do things like that.
It's why I'm creating my life now so that I can go do those things in the future. Yeah. Because the way my business was before, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So that's why that's one of the motivations I had to recreate the way my business is structured. And I'm putting in the work now so that I can go do those things and not be without income when I do them. In fact, my income will keep going up and up and up. And that's what I'm working on. So I'd rather suffer a little bit now to build what's going to be absolutely extraordinary in the future.
I love that. And so speaking of building that, everyone, please go check out Croix at unstoppablemorning.com. If you are on catching this on one of our socials, he'll be linked in the bio here and linked in captions and tagged and all those things. If you're in YouTube, you can click over from here. But if you're listening online or on a podcast, just check out unstoppablemorning.com, learn more about Croix. Croix, thank you so much for coming out on the show, sharing your story. Really appreciate it. And to all my biz ninjas, wherever you're listening, watching, or tuning in, it's your turn to go out and do something.